All right. Hello, everyone. This is Dave Bitton, CEO here at PracticePanther. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and let you know to please send us any questions you have in the chat, and we will do our very best to cover all of them in the end. If we don't have time to get to your question, I promise we will email you back the answers afterwards. We're also going to be recording this webinar, so everyone will receive an email afterwards to review it, and you will be able to replay it shortly after the webinar ends. So we are very excited to have Mary Juetten with us today. She's going to speak about something we love using every day here at PracticePanther, and that is KPIs, key performance indicators, my favorite topic. So she's going to teach you about tracking your growth, how to improve your firm's results, setting goals, and holding your team accountable. And she's going to teach us all these tricks of the trade. So Mary, first of all, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you very much, David, for having me.
Awesome. And to start things off, I will give everyone a quick bio about yourself. So Mary is actually the founder and CEO of Traklight, and she has dedicated her 30-plus year career to helping businesses achieve and protect their success. She serves on the Group Legal Services Association Board, which we're a big part of, by the way, GLSA, we love them, and is an access advocate for Legal Shield. And in 2015, she co-founded Evolve Law, which is an organization for change and technology adoption in the law. She was also named to the ABA's Legal Technology Resource Center's 2016 Women in Legal Tech list and the Fast Case 50 class of 2016. She's also a published author, and you can check out her latest book called Small Law Firm KPIs. Wow. So Mary, really impressive resume. You have a ton of letters at the end of your name. So tell us, kind of walk us through your career and how you got to where you are today.
Well, it's a little bit of a disjointed 30-year path, but the constant throughout it all is that I've worked in mainly professional services. I'm a professional accountant from Canada, and I also have the same CPA designation in the US. And I went to law school to be a white-collar crime prosecutor. And as you can tell from everything that you've just said, I did not do that. I created, I came out and I created Traklight to help small businesses succeed. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then I got involved in the whole legal tech arena, and I've always loved writing. So writing and bringing what I know about key performance indicators, which I learned when I was at Pricewaterhouse. So that tells you how long ago it was, before it was PwC. Yeah. We did KPIs for education. And, being an accountant, I've worked with billable hours, fees, flat fees, and all those things for 30 years. And I'm married to an engineer. And so he deals with project management. That's what he is. He's a project director. So our family is very nerdy around the hours and professional services.
Awesome. So tell us what is on the agenda for today.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about KPIs. And the way I like to break it down, there are tons of KPIs that you can be using, but I'm going to divide them into two categories, clients and cash, because ultimately you need clients, you need cash, you need them both. And then we'll finish up with explaining a little bit on how to get started with KPIs if you're not using any. And then, as you mentioned, take some questions.
Awesome. Sounds good. So let's start off with KPI overview. So what are the, 5 W's as you call them?
Yeah, that's just borrowing from journalism, just so that I can remember as I'm presenting this.
Who, what, why, where, when. Yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of times, like as the next slide shows, in the whole use of KPIs, we want to look at who do they apply to. And as I mentioned before, they apply to everyone, every business, and law firms are businesses. I know there's a big that can sometimes cause a big problem when you say that, but you are running a business, and you do have all of these administrative tasks that can be overwhelming. So one of the things before we even get started down KPIs is this is for all size firms, but when you're in a small firm, some of these things like payroll, accounting, all of this, you don't have to do it all. It's the same thing with KPIs. If you have a person in your firm who loves Excel and loves numbers and loves PracticePanther and mining it for data, then great. Then have that person work on your KPIs. But if you're in a small firm or a medium-sized firm and this is not your thing, then become educated on what, the what and some of the metrics, and turn it over to somebody who's going to do it.
Got it. Okay.
What is it? The next slide, we talk about what are key performance indicators. So I've done this presentation numerous times, and sometimes this light bulb goes off when people read this slide because they realize I am using KPIs. I just didn't know they were called KPIs.
They call them goals, targets, I guess.
Metrics,
yeah.
measures.
Analytics,
so, it doesn't matter what they are. Like, you don't have to call them KPIs. It's all about getting some data and then analyzing it. And as the slide says, KPIs are not check the box. The I, and why I like calling them KPIs, the I stands for indicator. So it's indicating something to you, which means that you have to do something. Yep. One of the other caveats that's not on the slide is that if you're going to do KPIs, there's this implicit understanding that you are curious about how you're doing, you want to fix a problem, and that you're willing to change. So this is something that allows you to move from this, let's just look at the end result, what is our profit per partner. That's not really going to help you. Some of the indicators can be leading indicators. We'll get into measuring your client's success. If you're having clients that are very unhappy, that's a leading indicator that you're going to have a problem down the road. So, borrow from these other industries. And the good news is that the other industries have been using these for literally over, years and years and years. KPIs in education. I did that project when my daughter was born and she just turned 23. Wow. So there you go. It's been around for a long time.
So you're saying the last thing you're saying is move away from profits per partner? Are you realizing that a lot of law firms are just looking at that one metric?
A lot of law firms will look at profits per partner, and you do get people who are a partner in a firm, and they make over $1 million a year, and they're happy like that. And that's their one metric. That's fine. If they're not willing to change, and if they don't want to try anything new, and they're satisfied with that, they don't have to do any other KPIs. These are for, KPIs are for people who want to improve their bottom line. So we can dive into that in the next slide, where we're talking about why are you going to do this? So if you're that happy partner making, over $1 million a year, and then you can apply the if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach. This is the struggling, these KPIs are for the struggling solo or small firm, or even mid-sized firm, where, you haven't been able to make all of your payments that are due last month without tapping into a line of credit or using your credit cards because you don't have enough cash, or you're getting negative feedback, just anecdotal feedback from clients. So all businesses need cash. And so, the expression is cash is king. So your cash is king, but your clients are your source of cash. And it's much better to, if you're in this type of law, a practice of law, it's much better to be selling repeat business to clients, or having those clients who are happy with what you're doing, referring their friends and family or other companies. It depends obviously what kind of law you do. Right. So what the mind shift of doing this, you want to do KPIs because you're going to improve your cash and you're going to improve your clients. But the idea is to stop looking at your input as a lawyer. Like, your input is your time or your expertise. Start looking at what the clients are experiencing. And this is just like a little side note. For those people who think that if you change the way you bill, that you can stop recording hours, that is wrong. It's like so wrong. And I know there's some people who've been writing on this saying value billing and flat fees don't require you to record your hours. That would be the equivalent of saying, hey, I'm going to make this car and I'm not going to record any of the other raw materials that are going into it or the time that it's spending on the assembly line, whether that's with a robot or a person. It doesn't matter. So basically the bottom line is time is money. and you do have to record what you're doing, but we're going to shift away from saying that you're successful if you bill a lot of hours. And I think that's on the next slide.
Right. So just to touch on this last part. So are you also recommending that if you are an attorney and you're doing a contingency case or a flat fee case, that you should also record your hours regardless to also be able to see your ROI in the case at the end of it?
Yes. So particularly for flat fees, because how are you going to know if your flat fee structure, so just to back up, when you're calculating how much your flat fees are, that's a time to go into your practice management system, your PracticePanther system, and look at what effort it has taken for similar matters. So that's not one of the KPIs that we're going to go into today. But as you mentioned, ROI or contribution margin from your matters is something that you use to set those fees. So, or you should.
Great idea. So basically, if you have a case that you've had in the past and you want to charge them a flat fee, you can go back in and look at a previous case that you've done that was similar and see how much time did I spend on that one. And that's how you can kind of calculate your flat fee for the next case.
Correct. And then when you actually execute the matter for the client, or whatever the matter might be, then if you're recording your time, you can go back and go, oh, wait, well, this time that I did a very similar matter, I actually spent half the time, or I actually spent twice as much time. And that helps you not only with profitability, but staffing, because then you can look and be like, when this person does the case, it takes much less time than the other person.
Interesting.
Means you have to have everyone recording all of their time without any punishment. And so that's the problem that we have with a lot of firms, is that they focus on people billing as many hours as they can, but then there's a punishment if you bill too much and you go over the budget. But you actually want to reward people for giving you the right information, because it might be that you didn't train them properly.
Otherwise, if you're getting mad at them, they're never going to record their time accurately again, basically.
Correct. That's something that happened to me in the 80s, back in the 80s, when we took a pen and we did our timesheets at the end of the month. We used to have detailed, because we did flat fees for our accounting projects. And so you would be given a budget for doing something. And as a first year, or even as a summer student, I was like, oh, I have 5 hours to do this. Oh, crap. It's the end of the day. I spent 8 hours doing this. I'm just going to write 5. And my supervisor said to me, you're not going to get in trouble if you put the date, because you don't put it to non-billable time. You have to record your time accurately. How else are we going to price these matters? And I mean, that's over 30 years ago, and that still holds. Now, contingency is interesting, because you have the lawyers who are like, it is what it is. I'm not going to bother recording my time. Right. And I spoke with a lawyer who's been doing this longer than I've been working, for 40 years. And he estimates for each type of case that he gets, it's personal injury. And he's like, I put them into these different categories, which I often call buckets. If you think of, I've got these 5 different types of cases. And he says, I record my time because I want to see how much I'm spending and what the return is on these different cases. And I know another law firm where they do workman's compensation claims. And what they do is every once in a while, they say, and it's all contingency work also, they'll say, let's record all of our time for this case to test if we're still staffing appropriately. So
interesting. Okay, awesome.
Okay, so moving on.
I think that the next slide kind of segues into this, because for those attorneys that want to record all their non-billable hours to track their ROI. So for those watching that do use PracticePanther, there's a very easy way to do this, just to teach them. When you create a new time entry, there's a billable box at the bottom that's always checked yes by default. So you're pretty much always billing for time entries. But all you need to do is just uncheck the box to no, and then click save. So if you spent, like you said, 5 hours on something, write it down, track your time, make sure it's non-billable so it won't show up when you generate invoices, and click save. And then when you finish the case at the end, you'll be able to go back and see how many hours did everyone bill for this case summarized. And then you could also see their hourly rate if you want to calculate it and how much money you made, so you can calculate your ROI in the case. Very simple.
Awesome.
All right, so take us through this one.
Yeah, so this is an example from the book that I wrote that you mentioned at the beginning. And
awesome.
So these are all, first of all, disclaimer.
By the way, where can they buy that book?
It's on Thomson Reuters Legal Solutions, but you can also just go to Amazon. And it's
awesome.
on Amazon. And if you Google my last name, Juetten, and small law KPIs, it'll pop up. And so the idea of the book was I made up all of these law firms and these little stories to illustrate some of the things that we're going over today. And so these are just charts and information from the book. It's all fictitious. So that's my disclaimer that this is not a real law firm.
And just to pull this up for everyone, this is the book right here?
That is it.
Okay, awesome.
Sometimes Amazon does this crazy, none in stock, which is not true. Let's see, they do this.
Okay.
Well, they
only 8 in stock. Order now. Yeah.
That's very Amazon. Nothing against
Wow, we're getting a sneak peek of the book. I'm excited. Okay, so let's go through this. Cool.
Yeah. So what this talks about is a little bit about what we were just talking about. That Alan, he's this fictitious associate, and he is a billing machine. And if you look down where it's in red in the bottom right-hand corner, his utilization was 116%. So he is like way over his target. He thinks he's getting a big bonus. But if you look, his collected billings were only 86%.
Yep.
So like you were just illustrating, if you go over in something, you still need to record the time, but you don't want it to go into billable time in the sense that you're not going to recover that. Because utilization is useless in terms of when you go to pay those bills. So the idea is focus on the billings that are collected rather than how much you actually just record. So the key again to this is making sure that if you're Alan's supervisor, that you're explaining to him, you're going to get rewarded not on the 116% utilization, but your KPI for the year is to make sure that your billings collected are 90 or 95 or whatever you want to do. So that's,
and you know what's funny, Mary? A lot of not a lot actually, very few people have asked for this information in PracticePanther because I think very few people are tracking it to this depth. So we actually I threw in a slide here also because we made this report for those people, and I think under like 5% of people are ever even coming to this report. It's very low, but it's an amazing report built in that people don't even know about. So in the software, you can go to more reports, payment reports, and there's a report called Originating Attorney Report, which shows you a summary of all the revenue originated by a certain person, your firm, that was billed by a certain person, your firm. So let's say I'm a lawyer, I'm billing for myself, and it shows how much money was actually collected on time entries and the expenses and other fees and taxes. So if you want to do a report or a KPI Excel list of how much someone collected versus billed, this is the report that you should use. Now, we always tell people, do your competitions and goals and targets based off this report, based off collection. And it's really interesting because we just added a new feature where they can apply payments on expenses first. So after expenses are paid off, then how much did you collect? How much money did we make from this case? So this is a great report. I'm sad not many people are using it, but for those watching, definitely use this report. It will help you a lot.
Cool. I'm psyched that you have that. So when I wrote the book for Thomson Reuters, we did this little survey. And this was something that I wanted to see how many people are actually using KPIs. So some of the interesting results, there was 62 firms who responded and 10 solos and 50% were under 10 attorneys. So, you know, depending on who uses PracticePanther, this is, you know, it does indicate how solos and smalls are using technology. And the good news is 81% of them use technology, although only, you know, of that, only about half of them use practice management. So there's still a long way to go making sure that firms use practice management. But what's really crazy, if you look at the last little bullet there. Out of the people who said they use more than 4 KPIs, and most of them are saying they're using the collected billings that we were just talking about, and some of them talk about overdue accounts receivable, but we're getting down really low. Only 3 of them measure client satisfaction. And if you look on the next slide.
Yeah, it's very low. I'm telling you, like, no one even uses these reports that we built for them. I mean, the people that use them are only ones that requested it, but it's under 5%.
Exactly. And then this slide is a little even scarier, is that when people, at the beginning, we were looking at profits per partner, which is based on, your financial statements. And so of this survey, 58 of the 62 responded to this question. 31 of them said that they use take-home dollars or their bank balance. So, I mean, this brings me back to an earlier point that if this is not your forte, or there are a lot of not engineers, because they love math, but there's a lot.
Thinking about your husband now,
there's a lot of doctors and there's a lot of lawyers who are not good at math. And that's okay. Then find somebody who is good, because if you're using your bank balance to decide if you've made money, that's very scary. So it doesn't allow you to make any kind of corrections and figure out what's going on. Plus, it's not accurate, because you could have an outstanding check to somebody, or automatic withdrawals that come in the next day. So that is really just not a good idea whatsoever. So where this KPI approach has worked is where somebody takes an approach to looking at how, like, as more of a workflow, and you need to look at what is your biggest pain point, and is that cash or is that clients? Often it's both, because they do go hand in hand. So when I was researching and writing and consulting on KPIs to write the book, a lot of the lawyers that I spoke with were asking about the client development side. They're like, we've been using practice management for a while. We understand the billable hours and, that we should focus on collections, but let's talk about client development. So that's where we're going to start, is with clients.
Okay. You want me to pull up this starter spreadsheet?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Awesome. All right, let's do it.
This starter spreadsheet has 5 of the 41 KPIs that are in the full book. And the scary thing is I've come up with 9 more, or 10 more. So there is a huge spreadsheet. Yeah. So this starter spreadsheet, if you're interested in getting it, you can email David or you can email me. Our information's at the end, and we'll send it to you. It's basically from the book. It has a bunch of numbers and everything in it, just so you can see how the spreadsheet works.
Oh, so you're willing to give away the spreadsheet for free to anyone watching right now?
Yep.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Because not everyone loves Excel like I do. So you can use... That's something that my husband and I do share, the love of Excel. So this has 7 categories, but you'll notice there's only 5 KPIs in there. And so we're going to talk about each of these. We did the billings collected by attorney, which is under performance. And we're going to talk about client development, client acquisition costs, and client experience, those 3 client focused metrics, and then we'll finish up with the aging tolerance. So awesome. We're going to start with the clients. And so we're going to go to the why. Why are we starting with clients? Now, I've already said this, but that whole thing about repeating yourself. So
cash is king.
Cash is king. And the other piece of it is that clients are demanding that their lawyers serve them better. It used to be, it was that very much like you could launch your practice and sit back and then they will come. That doesn't happen anymore with the law. So moving on to the next slide, here's a couple of points about making sure that your clients are able to not only provide feedback, but you're trying to ease the pain of accessing your services for clients. As many of us know, as consumers, you want everything now. You don't want to have to phone a lawyer and wait for them to phone you back. You want to be able to book an appointment, book a call. A lot of people don't want to, millennial or not millennial. I'm not a millennial, obviously, as I have millennials as offspring. But I've used legal services in the last 5 years, and it irritates me when they don't have a practice management system that allows you to pay online and allows you to pass documents back and forth. So there's lots of expert systems. Traklight is one of them, but then there's others like Weavorce or Neotologic, where you can have somebody fill in information before they go in. So it's like, it's an issue spotter for the attorney, and it's triage.
Like an intake form questionnaire.
Like an intake form questionnaire. Neotologic helps build those. Weavorce has one for divorce. Traklight is focused on small businesses. It helps them. So you're educating. And I should also mention Legal Shield, for example. They have a mobile app with a will questionnaire. So you want to make sure that your firms, and Legal Shield has provider law firms and thousands of attorneys that work for them. You want to make sure that your firm is very accessible to this, because what you want to be asking them is all about their experience, which is on the next slide, which is
and just to add one thing before we jump. So I definitely agree. And we also have intake forms built in. So we always tell people, make an intake form questionnaire for every practice area that you do. So when a client comes to your website, they click on family law, they'll have a family law questionnaire, personal injury questionnaire, or just email it to them or put it in an iPad, make it easy for them. So all that data comes into your software right away. But, it's funny that you mentioned this, because you'd be surprised, Mary, how few attorneys answer their phones. I mean, we call thousands of attorneys a week, and you would be very surprised how few actually answer their phones. And they don't even have virtual secretaries or receptionists. And I tell them, just, get Ruby, call Ruby, ruby.com, and they'll be like your virtual answering system. So, we can't even reach them, and I'm guessing that their clients probably can't even reach them. So you're right. It's a big problem that lawyers need to solve today. Exactly.
Okay.
NPS so score. I love NPS scores.
And NPS. So this is relatively new within the law, and it doesn't require any sort of fancy technology at all, like most of these KPIs. If you have Excel, that's great. If you have PracticePanther to pull all this information out for some of the KPIs, wonderful. Net Promoter Score, you can use SurveyMonkey, you can use Google Docs. You're basically sending out a question, which is in the top left-hand corner, which says, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not at all likely and 10 being extremely likely, how likely are you to recommend XYZ law firm to your friends and family, depending on what type of law, or to other companies, or to your colleagues? And the idea is that people will report that. You don't want to ask this anonymously of your clients, because there's nothing worse than giving feedback and then never hearing another thing. So if I tell my lawyer I'm unhappy and I just give them a bad rating, I would expect someone to reach out to me to ask me why or why not, or to say, hey, we thank you for your feedback. So that's important. And the second part of that is, I always recommend to lawyers that I'm talking to about KPIs to not just send out the numerical part of this, but add an optional question of why or why not, because you'll get feedback.
Right. And I was talking with, I believe, Steve Fretson, regarding processes, procedures. And I think one of the things that he was mentioning was that at the end, when the client, when you're done with the client, you finish the case, you have to have a process to end the case out. So, give him he loves surveys. So this is definitely him. So he sends a survey. He asks if they would recommend. He does an NPS survey. So build that process where you just build it into your company. So when someone leaves you, here you go. Here's a survey. Here's the NPS automated. You could do it in email. You could do it in a paper survey. If they come into the office one last time, give it to them there, whatever it is. But it's really good to collect this data. I agree.
Yeah. So if you just go back for 1 sec, I'll just quickly explain how the calculation works. And so the idea is, anyone who answers 9 or 10 is going to count as positive, and anyone who answers 1 to 6 is, as it says, a detractor. They're going to be negative. You're going to ignore the neutrals. So in our little example here, we have 9 over 22 is 41%, and you minus the 5 over 22, 23%. So it gives you an NPS of 18%. And it's like law school again, because the answer to the question of what does this mean is it depends. It depends on how your what was your target. In the top right-hand corner, this is again from the book, just made up a target of 70%. And their first month that they did this, it was 18. So that's where you have to get into the why or why not and find out a little bit more.
And I believe 70 is super high. If you can get 70, you're doing very, very, very good.
Yeah, so that's part of the whole part of the book was like they just randomly set this target, because they think nobody wants to hear bad things. And the other thing is that when in the book, fictitiously, they didn't understand that it could also be, the score can be negative, because if you get no promoters and a bunch of neutrals and detractors, you're going to end up with a negative number. So 70 is actually like 170% more than the worst that you can get, which is negative 100. So
correct.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So this is something where we borrow again from outside the law, but we're looking at a pipeline. And this is for firms that, go like this. You might have a lot of work and a little work, and you might be hiring extra people to help, or telling all your existing folks to take their vacation. So in order to try to get a little bit of better handle on what's going to be coming in the door and what matters you're going to be doing over the next few months, and how does that tie in with whatever budget you have, because you should have a budget. And the budget should not just be like, I want to make 1.2 million. So that's $100,000 of revenue a month. It needs to be a little bit more thought out.
I'm just curious, sorry to pause you and go off topic for a second, but do you consult with other attorneys? Like if someone was listening and be like, hey, can you help me? Do you do stuff like that or not really?
I used to do that. And then I wrote the book. And the idea is, buy the book and give it to your accountant. I do help some companies, if somebody has a few questions, but I generally don't do like full-on consulting anymore, because I would rather be doing these webinars and things like this and have people to buy the book.
Got it.
But sorry.
Okay. So you pretty much put it all out there in the book.
It's all out there in the book, and it's all out there in the spreadsheet.
Wow.
I used to use the spreadsheet to consult like the huge spreadsheet, but now I believe the spreadsheet, the big, huge one, will be available on Lawyerist, because I added to it and changed it and sort of made it into its product by itself. But the free spreadsheet, it's also on Lawyerist, but you can get it by just emailing in. So the idea of a pipeline is stolen from sales. So for those of you who have any knowledge of sales, this will the idea of go get, and if people are prospects or leads, etc., we borrowed from sales. So on the next slide we have the example, which there you go. So the idea, if you look in the top right hand corner, there's what's called the adjusted prospect pipeline. So that's, again, we're doing math, but that's why you use the Excel spreadsheet, because it does the math for you. But the idea is that you want to see what's in your pipeline versus what your target is, which is your budget. So for this firm, their budget is $20,000 a month. So in January, if you look, their adjusted prospect pipeline's $50,000. So that's great. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. But then by the time you get to March, you'll notice that they've converged. So the pipeline's about 22,000, and their budgeted revenue is 20. So concern there that maybe there's more business development that needs to go on. So the idea of a pipeline, and this is very important, this is not your financial statement. This is an estimate that you use for figuring out where you should be spending your time, whether you should be doing more business development or not. So the idea is that you have your clients, and then you estimate your potential clients, and you estimate how much revenue is going to come from them. And the immediate thing is like, well, how would I know that? Well, we discussed before the idea of flat fee types or putting your different types of clients into kind of buckets. And that's something that you need to be able to do. So when you meet with a client, you go, oh, this is, if I'm a family lawyer, okay, this is a really expensive divorce with children, et cetera, et cetera. So this is going to be like 25 grand. Right. And so if you look at the client 6 line there, we say, okay, it's going to be $25,000. And then the go means if this person goes ahead with hiring a lawyer. So the go and the get percentages, you really only want 25, 50, 75, 100. This is just an estimate. And again, not your financial statements.
So go means 25% chance to close this client?
No, it means 25% that they'll actually get a lawyer to do this. Like if you look at client 5, $1,500, let's say you're still a family lawyer and they just need some sort of support agreement adjusted. So you charge $1,500 for that. They have told you, this is client 5 now, they've told you they 100% need somebody to do it. The get is that the percentage that it's going to be you who gets the work. So are they going ahead and are they getting? So this process it's not like a multi-hour, 6-hour process. This is, you can, and you don't need to use Excel. You could do this on the back of a napkin, but it's, instead of having it keep you up at night, which is one of the lawyers I work with on a recent presentation, he actually took the starter spreadsheet and applied it to his firm. And he's like, these are all the things that were keeping me up at night that I was doing in my head. Now I've put them into the spreadsheet.
So I want to ask you, so it's not necessarily client 1 and 2, it's more like lead 1, like they haven't gone with you yet. Right. They're leads still. Right. Okay.
So this is, again, pulled out of the book. So it's like potential. So it should really say potential client. So the idea is that the get means you're 100% like sole source. So with client 6, it means that the guy has told you, I'm divorcing my wife. It's going to be a $25,000 matter, but he's just not sure whether he's getting a lawyer or not. Like, I'm just making this up, obviously. But he said, if I do go ahead, you're getting my work. So that is 100%. But then client 5 is like, okay, I need this support letter. I know I need a lawyer. I'm going to go ahead with that. But I'm talking to 3 other people. So that could be 1 and 4. So, it's very much an estimate. And this should take you, less than an hour. Once a month, you should be looking ahead at what's in your pipeline. Because the idea is, if it starts dipping down like it does in this March here, you might want to go find some other work, because the value, additional work, not a different job. That sort of came out wrong. So the dollar value that we have on the total sheet of potential clients is 48,000. So the idea is that might, allow you to sleep at night. Oh, I have $48,000 of potential work. But when you actually apply the go and get, it drops to 22,000. So that might lead you to say, I better like find a few more prospects to get that into a healthier place.
And you just gave me an idea, because you could actually build this into PracticePanther. So for those listening, you can actually create custom fields for this information, which can say custom field 1 when you add a new contact in, value, custom field 2, go, custom field 3, get. And then you can even adjust the value right there for number 4, or you can export it to Excel and run those in Excel if you want. But you can actually track this. This is great. I'm gonna recommend this to some people.
Cool. Well, that's very exciting. See, you're open to change. Exactly what you need to be.
Awesome.
Okay. So another client metric that's important, that is again taken from outside the laws, on our next slide, which is CAC. I just like saying that.
Client acquisition cost. I know it's a weird one. Let me ask you: Is this similar to CPA, cost per acquisition?
Yes, it's the same thing. But I never use an acronym called CPA, because that's like certified professional accountant.
Right.
So I like, some people call this client acquisition cost, or acquisition cost, but that's not as exciting, AC. So the idea here, it gets back to a couple of things that we talked about. What you're trying to do is figure out how much did I spend acquiring the new clients I got this month? Now, again, not your financial statements. These are KPIs, so they're indicators of that you need to do something. So in this case, if you look at the January in the top right-hand corner, just like right, left, the top right-hand corner. So yeah, it's $29.50, and their target, again, from the book, $250 a client. So they're a little bit out of whack. Now, what happened was that in the fictitious example, they were thinking, okay, we're spending, on advertising, sales, and marketing costs. You'll see it's $450. That's what they were thinking was the cost of acquiring the client. But it's not just that cost. It's the opportunity cost or the billable hours that you're spending on clients instead of spending on client acquisition instead of actually servicing clients. So in this case, there's $2,500 worth of value there. And I have a lot of attorneys will say to me, well, that's not what I get paid. I don't get paid $250 an hour, which is in our example. That's not why we use that. We use it because, again, if David, you're out schmoozing with clients or presenting and you're not working on a billable matter, then you're losing that time. So
it's funny. Steve Fretzen, the business development coach, actually, he said that he had one of his clients and he asked the guy, oh, how much, what do you do all week? Where does all your time go? He goes, oh, I go to every networking event. I'm everywhere. So I'll spend maybe half my week, like 20 hours just networking. He's like, wow, like 20 hours is a lot of billable time that you're just losing doing that. And you should probably be spending a little bit more time actually working with your clients, talking to your clients and billing your clients instead of trying to just schmooze people all day long that aren't bringing you any revenue back sometimes.
Right. And it might be that, you get further into it when you actually start analyzing what you're spending your time on and whether, this is an overall. So for example, they got one new client and that client costs $29.50. By the time they get to March, they got 3 new clients and they spent a little bit more time. So they're down to $1,000. But then it becomes what type of client? Because if you got one client and you spent $29.50, but that client is a $100,000 client, then that's good.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you can't just cherry pick these and not really understand how they all work together.
So just to summarize, 'cause I have a question on this. So basically what you're saying here is a lot of attorneys are looking at the client acquisition cost just from a marketing spend. For example, I spent $500 on Google this month and I got 1 client from that. But they also have to take into account that if they're spending, are they so let's say they get 20 leads from Google this month and they spent $1,000 on Google. So, but they also spend 10 hours interviewing all these clients. So you're also saying to take that time that they're spending on all the leads and also throw that into the equation?
Correct. And then that gets back to 2 things we talked about, making sure that you're tracking all your time, billable and non-billable. So you can do this. So it's pretty simple. You just create a code that's client development. And then the other piece of it is that by using some of these expert systems, or in the case of an attorney that I work with a couple of years ago, she did her own KPIs, but she didn't do this one. So we actually ran this one and she realized, okay, my cost of client acquisition is super high. Instead of me answering the phone and in terms of doing an hour free time with people, like first she would talk to them and then she'd set up an appointment and then they'd come into the office. She changed her whole system so that she paid somebody $12 an hour to answer the phone, created a list of things to ask. And then it was like, okay, these people are kind of worthy of some free time, but now it's only a half an hour. And these other people I'm going to talk to on the phone. And then these people over here, they're not going to be kind of more than a $1,500 client. So I'm going to send them over to this type of service. So it's those type of things come from analyzing, at a more in depth.
Right. Yeah. A lot of attorneys, I think, just do this in their head. They're like, oh, this could be a potential good client. I'll give them an hour of my time. They're just doing it in their head.
Right. And then, so unfortunately, that then keeps you up at night.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just go on to
what's Avo Sink or Swim in the bottom left?
Oh, okay. So this was really interesting. Avo did a report, and if you just Google, like, it's really small. The bottom left is the URL link to it. But there's Sink or Swim: How to Adapt to the New Legal Customer. It's a very interesting report that all lawyers should read, because the second bullet there is that 1 in 5 of these consumers believe that they can figure out what lawyers know by going on Google and YouTube. So that's why it has to, again, you have to be easily accessible to clients.
And I'm going to pull this up on the screen so it's a little bit bigger. This is the link.
Yeah, and then I think it asks for your email, and
of course they want to get your information.
Of course.
Not surprising. But in a nutshell, that's what it's saying. Yeah, I spoke to them also recently. They're saying the same thing, that a lot of consumers are doing it themselves, and a lot of them are afraid to hire and call lawyers because they don't know how much they're going to charge. They feel like they're going to get ripped off. So there's like a little trust issue there going on. So you have to use, like you're saying, technology and good systems to show them, hey, we're transparent. We know how much this will cost. We've done this in the past. We have data that can tell you we spent 36 hours in the last case. You'll be around the same area. So you make them feel more comfortable, I guess.
Yeah, gone are the days where you can just say to clients, oh, I have no, and whether they're companies and even Fortune 500 companies, they don't want to hear that we don't know how much it's going to cost and it's impossible to know. You want to basically be able to tell people this is how much it is. And that's why you need all of this information to do any kind of alternate fees, including how much it's going to cost you to get all these new clients. Because as you build in your fees, it's not just the cost of delivering it. You have to be covering all of it.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about, you have here in the bottom right, chatbots. Have you seen this a lot lately?
Yes, it's very interesting. A lot of, like Legal Shield has a little chat bot, Aaron, that will ask you questions. And there's a company called 1L, and Jason Valles is the head of that company. And he's designing these chat bots for every kind of law. And so you can have the chat bot gather some information. There's also Law Droid that does incorporation in California for you. Yep.
I spoke to both those guys. Crazy, artificial intelligence the next few years is going to be scary.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Very interesting.
So we have a slide that I threw in here actually of how to, it's funny. I wrote when I first made this, I wrote tracking your CPA, and I'm like, oh, you use CAC. I'll throw that in there. So tracking your CAC and ROI. So for those using PracticePanther, it's very simple to do this. You have on the top of whenever you add a new contact or matter, you can tag them. And so in this case, I tagged them as Avo actually. So meaning that this lead or client came from Avo. So at the end of the month, you can see how many leads came from Avo, came from Google Ads, came from a networking event, business development, whatever you do. And then you can run monthly reports to see how much money did you make in your operating account, which means they've already paid you, or billable that you have to bill them for, or how much money they pay you in the trust account. And you can just export this to Excel, see the summary of it, and do all these data mining and reports that you want to do. But it's really easy. Just the thing that I've noticed though, Mary, is that we built this tool and it's really hard for people to get in the habit of using it. So you have to make habits and processes and procedures and make it a habit. And once you every time you add something new, you have to tag them. So we always tell people to ask their clients on the phone, where'd you hear of us? Exactly. And they always say, oh, online. But you have to keep drilling. Where online? Did you click on an ad? Did you see us on Facebook? Was it Google? Like on your phone? Where online? You have to really ask your customers to track your ROI. And at the end of the day, you can track all this once you do it correctly.
Exactly. And this is something that it's not out yet, but I wrote a second book this summer, awesome. Which is called The Data-Driven Law Firm, which dives more into gathering data and analyzing your processes. So hopefully that'll be out in early 2018, but it is without the data, you're just guessing and you're doing things in your head like you were talking about.
Yeah,
I think there's
correct.
One more slide on customers, if I remember.
Yep. Final thoughts.
Don't be afraid to end a bad client relationship. And you should also be defining who's your ideal client, because as much as you would, as as a business owner, you need to focus. As a lawyer, you need to focus too. Don't just take everybody who comes in through the door. So if you have like a sweet spot where you're going to feel like, you went into practice law to help people, you're helping people, and you're profitable, those are the type of clients that you should go after. So.
Yep. Correct. All right. Cash is king again. I love it.
There it is again. There's that say things 3 times. So now I've said it 3 times. So there's some statistics. I work with this woman on a couple of presentations, Lori Gonzalez, and she's out of Nashville, I believe. Yes, Nashville. And so she works with small firms on helping them with their collections. And her data shows that most small law firms are only collecting 90 to 150 days out. So you record the hours and then you might not bill them, or you might be billing flat fees, but the bottom line is from the time that you're doing the work until you're actually getting the cash in the bank, which we talked about, that's the metric that you need to look at by attorney, when you likely have to pay your bills within a month. Most of us have to pay everything. You have to pay your people, you have to pay yourself, you have to pay your rent, all of your malpractice insurance, all of these things are going to be due. So I talked to a lawyer not too long ago, who I won't identify, who said like they had to take out a line of credit because they, needed to be able to pay their bills. So this again becomes something that should be checked. And I tell people you should be doing this. And you mentioned routine. Your KPIs are something you do each month. And there's some that you do, only once a year, some you do quarterly. But if you have a cash problem, then you not only should do this once a month, you should set aside an hour or two if you have collections to deal with every week, and just focus on what can I do to get the time from when I do the work to when I bill or take the money from the trust account or whatever you're doing until I collect. You need to shorten that. And so the next.
And I want to mention something and jump in here for a second. So, I spoke to someone recently who said that lawyers, or there was a survey done, lawyers are afraid to bill their customers, it said. And I think I understand why, because traditionally, if you're not using a software that can make it easy to bill, we always ask you, well, how often do you bill? Once a month. It's always the same answer at the end of the month. And how long does it take you? They always go, a full day or the whole weekend, or it's crazy. So I think that's probably why they're afraid, because they're doing all this work. And then at the end of the month, they hit them with a huge bill. So we tell them, change it a little bit. Now that you have a software, you can, here, I'll just pull it up, make it easy to show people. You can go to new invoice, and I recommend using the multiple invoices feature. So you can generate all your invoices in one click from a certain date range, and then you could generate them and send them in one click. So instead of invoicing your clients only once a month, you can do this every 2 weeks. So now it's not as big as a bill. The client knows what they're expecting, and they see it coming. And then you could automate payment reminders, so it keeps following up with them. You don't need to do anything yourself anymore. You can just automate all this. So you mentioned automation and processes. These are one of them that we heavily push. Bill every 2 weeks instead of 4 weeks. And
to take that a step further, if you just go to the next slide, one of the things that you can do is bill when the matter's finished. So don't even wait. Like if you finish a matter on November 5th, you should have billed it on November 5th.
Yep.
Like if you're finished, don't wait the 2 weeks or the once a month. The once a month is the worst. And it basically means that everyone's going to shut down. And so you have 2 choices. You can stop doing work and deal with that, or you can spend your whole weekend as you discussed. So the key to finding out if you have a problem with your AR, so first you have your work in progress that we've been talking about, and you're issuing the bill. But then what lawyers are even worse at is collections, because they send it out and then they're like, okay. Some lawyers are afraid. I've had lawyers say, well, we don't want to bug people because of malpractice, and we don't want to do this. And it's like, why, when you do work for people, do you feel like they shouldn't pay you? So I encourage lawyers to, if you have a large amount that's over, this slide shows 60 days. For some people, it depends. Again, what is your tolerance? So for example, in this case, The billings are about $500,000 a month. If your expenses each month are 200,000, that means you can have a whole bunch that's overdue for a while before it has any impact on your cash flow. However, if your expenses are 450,000 and you're billing $500,000, then you're going to have a problem if your AR is shows 104,000. So I know you're going to show how to do this. The key is that you want to look at how much can you have over 30, over 60, and personally, no business should have anything over 90. And a good business is you send your bills out with payment terms that are due upon receipt. You set up retainers, advance fees, evergreen retainers if it's allowed in your state, whatever you can do, including accepting ACH online. You should basically accept any manner of payment.
Just so people pay you.
So that people will pay you.
It's funny. So there was I think I read somewhere online where lawyers are only billing 2.6 hours a day and they're only collecting 1.8 hours a day. So, I mean, there's so much money just being lost. And a lot of times they're like, oh, well, I don't want to charge my credit card because I'm losing that 2%. And I'm like, 2%, you're losing 30% of everything you bill. Like, who cares? Take that 2%. You could even, and most states now, you could even charge the clients the convenience fee for credit card payment. But a lot of people have asked us, Mary, actually to build them a feature with where they can add interest to their invoices now. So I know a lot of states allow this, so that you could actually add, if they haven't paid and it's 1 week overdue or every 2 weeks it's overdue, they automatically get interest on their invoice. So when people started doing that, we saw them getting paid a lot faster because now interest is adding up and no one wants to pay interest on their invoices.
Yeah, that's a great tip, and I hadn't thought of that one. So
I'm going to go to the next slide, which shows actually this is a brand new report that we just released a few weeks ago. I don't think many people even know about this or using it yet, but this is awesome. Just like what you were talking about, it shows you how overdue people are on their payments. And you never want to go over 90, like you said. So this is a great report to see how much clients owe you and how long it's been since they owe you money.
Yeah, and then you can just drill. This is a perfect report. And kudos to you guys for having this, because many practice management systems that I work with, they don't have it. So if you do work with QuickBooks or Xero or an accounting system, depending where your billing is coming from, sometimes you can look in your accounting system if your practice management system doesn't have it. But this is an awesome feature because this cash is king. So you should be able to see the aged AR with totals. And you should be, if you've got an AR problem, you should be looking at this once a week. Pick the biggest one. Like I would go to Joe Schmo and ask him, what's the deal?
All right. So getting started, how to tell us about the KPI framework.
So a KPI framework, as I mentioned at the beginning, is workflow driven. So you don't want to disrupt what you're already doing. You want to put in measurement to see if you need to make changes. And one of the things that I tell people is, if you don't, there's two things you need to have: a practice management system, in my opinion, because otherwise you run the risk of lots of bad things happening, including malpractice. So practice management, and you need an accounting system. Everything else is gravy, and you should figure out your KPIs and your process before you add any other technology.
And I'm guessing you recommend QuickBooks for sure, QuickBooks Online.
QuickBooks and Xero. QuickBooks Online, I use it personally I don't use it. I have an accountant. I am an accountant, but I know I know when I don't have time for things. So I have a bookkeeper who does our books. But the idea is that you look at this not as not as distinct clumps of KPIs, but you look at it like this slide shows you, where you're going from you developing the client, you acquire the client, you deliver the legal services, and then you go afterwards and you ask questions around client experience, which is NPS. But then the other one that we didn't talk about today, but is in the book, is all around firm culture and aligning your goals, and then doing surveys of your own team to see how they're feeling. Because again, there's going to be change that's going to come out of this. So I think it's on the next slide.
And one thing I'll add as far as internal surveys, we do internal surveys here at PracticePanther every quarter, and it's really important to make them anonymous. Otherwise, they're going to feel weird giving you feedback when you know who said it. So we make them anonymous. People can tell us exactly how they feel, and it's great. It really opened things up here.
Yes, and that's anonymous for those within a firm, depending on the firm. Perfect. But NPS should never be
right
anonymous.
For your clients. Correct.
So as far as getting started, pick your biggest pain point. So, you do that by if it's just you, then you can look in the mirror and have a conversation with yourself. But if you have a small firm, then get people together and figure out what is the problem. Often you'll have to go back to kind of square one. You get people who start firms, they're all busy, it's overwhelming. There is that survey that says that you are only really getting, you're only billing your clients for 2.6 hours. People are doing all this stuff. They're overwhelmed, yet they're not making enough money. But is that money what's important to people? Is it, the number of hours that they have off in the week? Is it the work-life balance that's elusive? What is it? So that's why when people ask me, hey, well, I want to get started, I'm going to make a plan, but I want benchmarks. It's like, no, stop with the benchmarks. You don't need to do that. It's what works for you. Like, are you happy with an NPS of 18? You might be, and somebody else might not be happy until they're at 70. So it's very personal. But again, make it super easy for clients. This is a law firm that's in New Orleans, and they're estate planners. So when you go in to pick up your estate plan, the final signing and everything, which still has to be signing, they hand you an iPad with the NPS and a bunch of other feedback. So that's a great way of doing it. McCarthy Tetra is a very large firm in Canada, but KPIs, this webinar, you can use all of this within big law, because particularly, when you have smaller practice groups within big law or medium-sized law, they operate as small firms within a bigger firm. So one of the things to do is, if you have a small group that you want to test something on, that's a great way to go. For example, with Net Promoter Score, you might say, I'm only going to send it to these type of clients that are our fixed fee clients or something like that. So don't be afraid to kind of pilot and start things out. And again, don't be afraid to make changes.
Yeah, it's so important. You have to always keep evolving. And I always tell people, I see the next slide actually is on technology, so it's perfect. But I always tell people, it's a funny story. Whenever, when I was looking for a dentist, I went to a few that I was recommended to, and I ended up choosing the one that had SMS alert reminders, that it gave me an iPad to check in and fill out their forms. And I'm like, wow, I realize a lot of law firms don't do this. They don't use SMS reminders. They don't use SMS alerts, which are built into the software. They don't give their clients an iPad for an intake form. They can do all these things. And I realized that I got sold to my dentist because of this amazing technology, workflow, and process they had. And I was like, attorneys should also sell that experience if they can.
Exactly. And that's where, getting back to Legal Shield, I'm an access advocate for them. And so in order to write on what they do, I joined. And so I have on my phone, I have a mobile app that I'm a resident of the state of Washington. So if I have a problem, I press a button and I'm connected to my law firm, not a call center. And it actually is 24/7 if you have an emergency. And if I got a traffic ticket, which, knock on wood, I don't, I can take a picture of the traffic ticket, it scans and it sends it off to my law firm. And Legal Shield bought Shake Law several years ago, and so they have this whole series of free forms. So if I wanted to rent my house to somebody, I can download that. If I wanted to do an agreement, and those free forms are actually free. You don't even have to pay to belong to Legal Shield. So they're not replacing attorneys. They have thousands of attorneys. They have 39, I have a provider law firm in Washington State. So that type of seamless access is what all law firms should be going for. This idea that I saw on Twitter just the other day, there's a law firm that didn't even have a phone number or an email address on their homepage. It's like, how do you expect people to find you? So all of that said, I think I already mentioned this, is take a look at your processes before you purchase technology, and make sure that your practice management system has time and billing. that is, you have some of these systems that seem to only be managing case facts or whatever. Like, you need this kind of end-to-end, all-in-one type of solution in order to make sure that your clients have a good experience, because that's a reason for having these systems. Can you imagine going to a doctor that didn't have any kind of practice management system?
Yeah.
Like, that would be crazy.
Yep.
Yet there's tons of attorneys who don't have practice management systems.
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
I know. I always tell them, like, how come my dentist and doctor is so far ahead of your law firm? How come every dentist is so far ahead of law firms? It's weird. Law firms are behind all this stuff. So.
Yeah, and particularly with the customer relationship management, I remember my dentist from like 15 years ago. I would go in and she would be like, well, how are the kids? And all that. And I'm like, how in God's name does she remember all of this? Like, this is crazy. And you know what? I asked her once, and so this is like 15 years ago. So I said, well, how do you remember all of this? And she said, well, she said, I have this huge Rolodex and I just jot down stuff that you talk about every time you come. So that was like the hard copy version of a CRM. Yeah. But it's pretty important so that you don't make these huge faux pas with your clients.
Yeah. No, it's funny. My dentist is the same thing to me, but now it's like, it's becoming so like everyone already knows you're taking notes, but it's great. It's very personalized. Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah, extremely. Yeah. So what do we have left?
All right, so let's see. We've got systems and data.
Okay, so this is just the caveat. Garbage in, garbage out. It applies here. And make sure that you try, if you're going to use the Excel spreadsheet or you're using something where you're downloading reports, just download them and throw them into spreadsheets so that all links, because you don't want to set up something, first of all, that's time consuming, where you're copying data over or transcribing, and that's also how you're going to make mistakes. So that's my
I agree.
Takeaway.
And KPI framework.
Yeah, start with 10 or less. I get people who are like, oh, I bought your book and I'm going to implement all of it. It's
all
like,
of them. No.
Yeah. And I say that in the book, but make sure that you start small.
Yep. And just a question on that, by the way. So which ones should you pick? Just the ones that resonate with you?
The ones you pick your biggest pain points. So if your biggest pain point is cash, then right away look at your AR. And if your AR isn't bad, then look backwards. There's more detail in the book on calculating how long your lockup is, like how long things are staying. So it's sort of this triage backwards.
Got it. And you say measure more often at the start. So you're saying start weekly, and then eventually then you can go monthly, and then you can go stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly. And the book recommends for people, like, some things are quarterly, some things are annually, and there's a lot that's monthly. But it really depends on your circumstances, like the targets here. If you have something that you want to improve, it's actually fun to measure it every week because you see that improvement as opposed to waiting every quarter.
Right. Got it. Okay, awesome. And I think I have a slide on this actually on targets. So this is one of the last slides here, setting and tracking your goals. So we always recommend for law firms listening, you have to set targets and goals for every attorney in the firm. So it's funny, people will always complain, be like, oh, I want to make more money in the firm. Like, hey, like, you have these goals, you have these targets. If the name is, Javier, you're not the best performer. You have to get to the best performer, like Jason Mraz. Oh, what are these names they threw in here? David Blaine. So basically, there's some very clear reports that you can show people in the firm and just say, listen, it's not me. Like, it's not me, it's you. No, but you can show them these reports and say, look, this is how many hours every person in the firm builds. So set internal goals and have weekly competitions, have monthly competitions, and you have to set minimums. So, the minimum that everyone should build is at least 4 hours a day, for example, or 24, or whatever, 20 hours a week. And then what I recommend is giving bonuses. So the one who bills the most and collects the most this month will get $1,000 bonus, whatever it is. But you have to have targets, goals, incentives, bonuses. Make it fun. Make it a competition. It's all about that. So, and you have these reports to show them off to you. And I think that you have a slide on here on dashboard. I think this looks like Salesforce actually to me, right?
It's actually just the Excel spreadsheet.
Oh, nice. You're a master at Excel.
Yeah, I have to confess that I did have to. I actually had my husband make these graphs, and then I kept changing things in the book. And then finally, he's like, you know what? I'm just going to teach you how to do these graphs because I used Excel for years. But then it sounds ridiculous, but like I was a vice president, so I would just like tell people what I wanted to see, and so people made the graphs for me. And I hadn't made graphs when I went to do this for like 20 years. So now I do know how to make these graphs, but they're in the spreadsheet, and you can make these type of dashboards with just Excel. And there are fancy dashboards that you can buy, but I would suggest that you don't out of the gate, that you just start simple with Excel, use your PracticePanther, use that dashboard. I definitely agree with the whole competition. Lawyers, paralegals, people who work in law firms, they're all inherently competitive. So I think it will, if you can get all your goals aligned though, make sure that you don't set that billable hour target and then you just get people billing like way over a budget.
Right. So in your spreadsheet that you're offering everyone, these graphs are in there?
I think they are. I would have to
check.
Double check.
Okay, cool. And continuous improvement. Last slide.
Yes. Woo! Woo! Yeah, so we've said most of this, but it is a continuous improvement, which means you're going to set your budget every year. Don't just divide by 12. Take some time to figure out, like, what does my year look like? If you're going to take all of July off, then don't put the same revenue in July as you have for the rest of the year. And it's this experimentation mentality. Try new things. And that's why I suggest that you don't do like this whole huge course correction for the entire firm. If you're bigger than a solo, you might say, hey, you know what? There's this one lawyer who's really into this and wants to do the measuring. So like, let's trial things with them and then let's see what comes out of it. But again, if you're not going to act on any of this, just don't, save you and your team a lot of heartache and just don't do it.
Right. Right. Yeah, you've got to. So I mean, yeah, for everyone watching, like, build a plan, take this seriously, get the spreadsheet from her, and make a plan and actually execute the plan and put reminders in your calendar. Don't forget to check this API. You have to build it into your culture. It does take time. Keep in mind, this is a new process, a new habit you're forming. So it does take time. There might be pushback from people, but you're the one that needs to be in charge of this and take it forward.
Great.
I think we are opening it up for questions in a second. But let's go through this last slide right here.
Yeah, so just this is the book that I wrote for Thomson Reuters, and it's very practical. So it has all of the spreadsheet, like the huge 41 KPIs at that time spreadsheet in it, in the sense that there's all the pictures of it. And then you can email me or David for the starter spreadsheet. The book walks through examples. And then at the back, I actually put in the formulas for the huge spreadsheet. So if you want to create your own spreadsheet from the small spreadsheet, it's all there for you to just use those formulas. And and so that's the book. And
awesome. I wanted to actually ask you before we get into the question. So this is your contact information. So for those tuning in right now to the webinar, please start submitting your questions. We're going to start covering them in about 2 minutes. But before we do, I wanted to ask you, what exactly is Traklight and Evolve Law? If you can give us some more information about what you do.
Sure. So Traklight is when I went to law school, I worked in a technology venture clinic, and I worked with entrepreneurs, real live, like, you got to play a lawyer under a rule here in Arizona. And so I met entrepreneurs, and they had made mistakes, not filing their patents or that type of mistake, but they made basic mistakes with not protecting themselves in terms of having proper employee contracts, forming companies, all of this. So I created software that is basically like a TurboTax approach to identifying your risk and identifying your intellectual property. And, it has a dashboard and helps you figure out what your legal needs are, plus a whole bunch of other needs, like, needing an accounting system and a business bank account and all these type of things. So it's for small and medium-sized businesses, but it's also for attorneys, because we sell a version of it, which is Traklight Pro, that attorneys can use for lead generation or large companies. We have an ongoing contract right now with Paychex, who is sending it out to their small businesses, and it alerts them to all the different steps that they need to do so that they can maximize their value and mitigate all the risks. Along the way, I started Evolve Law, and the exciting thing about Evolve Law which is that we built this huge community in North America, basically, and companies came to us, and we promoted the companies through thought leadership, events, and we have a website and all that good stuff. But we're joining forces with Above the Law, and that we're actually merging with them next year.
Wow.
Sorry, this is going up. This might be going out next year, so it's March of 2018. We'll be merging with them, which gives our members, we had great reach and we did a lot of good work. But now Above the Law has 1.6 million readers, so it's a little bit bigger reach.
Yeah, and this is the website evolvelawnow.com.
Yes, and eventually we just launched in November of 2017. There's Evolve the Law, which is the two companies kind of together. The Evolve the Law, it's the Innovation Center on.
Oh, cool! On Above the Law.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, so I never saw this.
Yeah, it's brand new. It just launched.
Congrats. So. And then your other website is Traklight.com, this one.
Yes, Traklight without a C. That's a whole nother long story. So we do have, for any consumers watching this, we do have a free risk assessment, but anyone who watches this and is interested in using it for their firm, you can reach out to me and mention the webinar and we'll give you a discount.
Got it. And then how can they follow you online? You said you use Twitter. Is this your Twitter?
That is me. Yeah, same picture everywhere.
Awesome. I got you.
Yeah, I use Twitter, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn also.
Okay.
And thank you so much for letting me come and yatter about this.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And for everyone listening, the webinar was recorded, so we will email to you shortly. Mary was kind enough to offer you the sample spreadsheet, so if you do want it, please email her. Mary, this is your email, me.juetten@traklight.com.
It is. So I don't know if there's any questions or.
Yes, we have a few that came in. We're going to open it up for questions. If we don't have that much time, we're a little bit overdue. So if we don't get a chance to answer all your questions, I promise myself or Mary will email you them back. So the first question comes from Andy. Is there a certain number of billable hours each attorney should hit daily in my firm? Question. It's like a benchmark question.
It's like a benchmark question, which I can answer with the stock. It depends, but it depends on your overall plan. So I'm not suggesting that you don't set billable hour targets. I'm suggesting that is not the only metric, and that you perhaps want to tell people, okay, when this is the billable and collectible hour target. So I don't think there's a specific number that you can just throw out there. I think it depends also on, your paralegals. You might be saying, okay, we want you to be billable 90% of the time, whereas the associate, if they have client development, the same report that came out that said that it's 2.6 hours and 1.8 collected also said that on average attorneys spend 2 hours a day on client development. So you can decide if that's too much or too little and give that as a target.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Speaking about client development, I'll jump to a question by Amanda who asked, and it looks like you mentioned this a few times today, any tips on client development? And I guess she's asking when she's running out of, leads and new business. Do you have any tips in general when you were working all these firms and all these companies?
Well, I think one of the things is to try to get your firm out there in terms of thought leadership and speaking locally. Volunteer to speak. I know a lot of attorneys who they go out and they'll do like a 1 hour presentation and they'll get work out of it. So, and it's also writing helpful articles for people. There's kind of two camps. There's lawyers who are like, well, that's my IP. I'm not gonna share anything for free. And I just think that's the wrong way of looking at it. I think if you put the education out there, you will get clients, because there's lots of surveys, access to justice gap type work that's been done that shows that one of the biggest reasons people don't go to lawyers is because they have no idea they need a lawyer. So there's an education gap in America. So by writing, there's some great places you can write for the ABA. You can write for Above the Law. You can Evolve Law. We love people to create content, and we get it out there.
Awesome. And speaking about writing, we have a question from Bernard. It says you wrote 2 books. I guess you did write 2 books actually. Do you recommend attorneys writing books to get new clients? So it's funny that someone told me, I asked them also recently the same question. They're like, yeah, a book is pretty much like a really fancy business card, basically. Is that what you think? Your books were different. You really just like gave everything out there.
Yeah. So I enjoy creating these books, and because I enjoy doing webinars like this, and it's really fun for me when I do them when it's like you and I here. I've done several webinars where I've worked with attorneys or service providers who are also participating, and they're talking about all the work that they did with clients. So my advice to you as an attorney, if you want to write a book, I would write like an ebook, because you don't necessarily have the time to write a book.
Right.
It's quite long, but I would write something, if you can, where you're educating people about mistakes that you've seen or, in your area. So if it's a book like that, or, you can always write a bestseller like John Grisham and numerous other attorneys, but I don't think that's the question.
Yeah. Okay, cool. It looks like we're almost out of time, so I'll just choose one last question. This one comes from Ariella. This is a good one. If you had to pick only 3 KPIs, which one would you pick and why?
Okay.
I guess the top 3, yeah.
The top 3 for me, I would pick AR because you need your cash. And I would pick Net Promoter Score.
Okay.
And client acquisition cost. You notice that I'm just... Because if
you're taking one from every big category, basically, right?
Yeah, but it's hard, because then you do need to have the individual people's performance. But I'm pretending I'm a solo, so then I would do client acquisition cost. But if I was in a smaller firm, I wouldn't do client acquisition cost. I do the collections by attorney.
Awesome. Okay, amazing. I do see a few more questions, so I apologize, but I promise we will email you afterwards. But I want to thank everyone for joining us today. The webinar was recorded. We will email it to you afterwards. And I believe you should be able to replay it right away after we finish, so you can go and review it. And Mary, thank you so much again for taking the time to be here with us today.
Well, thank you very much, David. It was a lot of fun.
All right, thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a good one.